This is a budget which in a sense is going to be focusing on smart expenditure, focus on the digital ecosystem, focus on infra, focus on building assets, focus on creating logistics. From a market standpoint, the reason why markets are likely to be happy with this budget is because this budget in a sense will ensure that if the expenditure stays strong, and if the fiscal deficit assumption is 6.4, that means government will be doing all the heavy lifting, and they would be doing all the heavy lifting via the expenditure. Markets are at a day's high. We are going against the global market. Now that the event risk is behind us, government markets are likely to applaud that the growth DNA, the animal spirits, which the government unleashed in the last budget, they've done everything to ensure that the momentum and the mood does not change. There has been no change in tax structure. There has been no change in terms of LTCG. Of course, a crypto tax has come in. That's a separate debate. But the tone and the tonality of the budget is focus on expenditure, focus on productive expenditure, focus on smart expenditure, and that is where I think the broad message for the market is. And you can look at the market reaction. Banks are making a comeback, infra stocks are making a comeback. So government is saying that, look, we've really given the backdrop where corporates can spend, and this year we will be doing all the heavy lifting. Swami, what is your first take? We can argue about the fact that the government has decided not to walk on the path of fiscal consolidation, but on the expenditure side, sir, it's a big commitment.
Well, this is a risk-taking budget. It is a charge for investment. It is a non-populist budget. There have not been a huge amount of giveaways as I might have thought, as some others have thought. So they've decided that we are going to take the risk of inflation. We are not going to go for fiscal consolidation. We are not going to worry about that. We are going to have a charge of investment, capital expenditure up 35%. No particular stops for agriculture, very marginal changes out there, very marginal changes overall. It's a budget with a remarkably few changes in the tax proposals, hardly any change. The emphasis has been on better collection and using this buoyant tax collection for a charge on investment, especially on infrastructure, especially on the railways. The big new idea, I say, is the digital rupee. Now, it's not clear as to what exact shape this will take, the implications for payments, the implications for taxes, all this will be spelled out. But that is the one completely new thing, and we need to know a little more about that. But as I said, the budget, the main, this is aiming gung-ho for growth. It is saying, let me have a large amount of investment, which is going to be the government itself will take the lead in this, and the animal spirits of the private sector will be harnessed. It will come along in joint ventures, and on the other hand, through financing of the pushing startups, pushing the digital age. So this is a very forward-looking budget. The risk it's taking is of inflation. I might add that the one thing that nothing is being said about the very great disappointment of asset sales in the current year. The very slow rate of privatization, the very slow rate of the national monetization pipeline of selling old infrastructure, the fact that, you auctioned 150 railway trains, passenger routes, and nobody even bid. So, the huge failure on gaining revenue from that side, nothing has been said in the budget or addressed on that particular thing. And I think something should have been done there. Nevertheless, it is a bold budget going forward on investment, but I do wish something more had been said on much more rapid asset sales. Somebody should be taking the hit for the very, very slow progress so far.
Okay, so Swami, if I say that India has been a COVID survivor, we revived last year, this budget is in a sense ensuring that we thrive and we accelerate further. The focus is on expenditure, and the government is saying that rather than walking on the path of fiscal deficit, we will take the risk, we will ignore inflation for the short term, and we will do all the heavy lifting in terms of capital expenditure. There is little populism in this budget despite the rollback in farm loan. And Swami, this in a sense is a right message, I guess, for everybody, that the economy, which in a sense has recovered rather unevenly, the priority right now is to ensure that the growth goes higher, and growth will only go higher when big sectors will get a push from the government spending. Is that right, Swami?
Absolutely, absolutely spot on. So this is a growth-oriented budget, capex-oriented budget, not populist, not attempting to please lots of people, remarkably little changes in taxation. I mean, that is, it is really notable. So, a lot of budgets, the emphasis is on the tax side. Here, the emphasis is on the spending side. But as I said, the great failure has been to get enough asset sales. And on that, nobody is taking the responsibility for the failure. And we have been told nothing as to how to avoid a continuation of this failure. The finance minister said Air India privatized and some decision taken on Neelanchal.
Okay, I'm going to get a word in from Shefali, and Shefali, a budget like this is going to make life slightly difficult for the folks who track taxation at Deloitte, excepting Kipro tax. No big changes so far. Should you be smiling or should you be worried?
I'm smiling, Nikunj. And I think the reason for that is, that finally the commitment of providing a non-adversarial regime is shaping up. And, the finance minister did announce that now the department will be precluded from filing appeals where there is a jurisdictional high court ruling. I think that's a huge positive, announcement. And we'll have to see how that plays out. I think very few tax changes, as Swami also said. But lesser the changes, the better. That shows that now, we are in a more stable tax regime. We don't need to really tweak our regime, every time. But at the same time, providing more transparency and more certainty. The taxation of cryptocurrency, right? That was already on the cards. And I think finally, there is some announcement on that. Only one, reversal, so to say, on the deductibility of the health and education cess. So I think that seems to be one reversal based on certain positive rulings in favor of taxpayers. But I would say overall a very, very fair budget.
Vibha, the budget clearly has a very strong underlying message that the economy which has revived, we want it to thrive and accelerate. Is there enough in this budget which in a sense will excite everyone that government wants to do all the heavy lifting, unlike getting worried about interest rate tightening, what will happen to bond market, how credit agencies will react? This is a time to spend and do smart expenditure.
Sorry, that was for me?
No, that was for Vibha. Vibha.
Recording in progress.
Apologies, Nikunj. Yes, absolutely. This is a very growth-oriented budget. Absolutely the right medicine that is required as a nation comes out of pandemic. As all the building blocks are in place, you're also seeing the right amount of uptake even on credit and all the macro. So would give a major thumbs up, and also increasingly to have a light touch in terms of tinkering with a lot of bans and long-term capital gains tax and surcharge and so on, while she has done a cap on surcharge, which is welcome. But I think that overall, it's more focused on the big picture rather than the micro of certain industries and so on. We'll have to wait and see what the digital rupee using blockchain will entail. But I think directionally, very supportive of growth. Yes, inflation, we'll have to see how that pans out. Privatization is another, not said as much apart from one or two. Not very much on any specific sectors, including ours. So some of the asks in terms of what growth could have been. But I think largely very, very macro picture growth led and high on capital expenditure, infrastructure spending, railways, and so on.
Rajesh Kumar, you've been on the other side when the government in a sense was very cautious about spending and controlling expenditure because they wanted to control the fiscal in the pre-COVID era. This is a budget with different tone and different tonality, a budget which talks about the fact that if you spend, you'll have to spend now and rewards will come later, but it's worth the risk.
Yeah, so in terms of the direction for the fiscal consolidation that has been maintained, and the target is now 6.4, so which is a very good thing. And I think the last year budget also, because it was some sort of a 5-year document. So every year, I think budget is becoming more just a statement of account of the government, and which this document is. But I would like to come to banking and particularly 3-4 things. So one is this post office becoming more and more like banks. It's a very good initiative as far as financial inclusion is concerned. Then there was a lot of debate about crypto bill. But in this bill, at least a beginning has been made where crypto assets, the word used is virtual digital assets, which is nothing but crypto. So crypto assets by taxing and by TDS, uh, at least that uncertainty around crypto has gone, which is again I consider to be a very pragmatic step, because there was a talk about banning, but with these measures, at least I hope it should put to rest the speculation around how to deal with the crypto. And the digital currency by RBI based on blockchain technology, again, it is, I consider it to be in line with what is happening in the cryptocurrency world. So that is another thing. Then extension of ECLGS scheme. So that was on the expected line, enhanced expenditure on affordable housing. But many things, what I find is that they go missing, like say, for example, smart city projects. So there's no mention about that. There is some mention about urban planning, but how is it going to be different than what was a smart city project? No talk about disinvestment. What is happening to the privatization of two public sector banks, the national infrastructure pipeline, the asset monetization pipeline. So they all have not been covered in the budget. But I presume that because they are already announced and no specific mention probably was needed to be necessary. But on the whole, one is the intent about set the target for capex and then how much happens on the ground. So, and how to attract the private sector investment in this. One step about where there is talk about surety bonds by the insurance companies. Many countries have that system, and the insurance companies issue surety bonds. So it could also be a move to attract private sector investment in infrastructure. But on the whole, as I have always maintained that how do all these ideas get executed on the ground, and push for digital is very much visible. And the digital banking unit, I am honestly not very clear about the concept, because to me, digital is boundaryless. So when it is mentioned about 75 digital banking units in 75 districts, what does it imply? I think we will have to wait for details.
Sure. Okay, I just want to detail out what the market reaction has been up to so far, because while in the run up to the budget, the market was, raring to go. We're still holding on to our gains, but certain segments of the markets are definitely coming off. So Bata, Ashok Leyland, Tata Motors, IOC, HPCL, though to be fair, IOC, HPCL in any case were the weaklings from the word go today. But a bit of a cool off now coming in for Maruti, for an M&M, which was actually going very, very strong into the budget. Eicher Motors, Bajaj Auto, these are also stocks which are beginning to cool off. Similar is the state with the Hero MotoCorp as well, which has come off quite drastically from the highs of the day. Still going good though for banks. ICICI Bank, large infra companies or conglomerates like L&T still going strong by about 2.5%, and cement and metals as well as the sectors of the economy. Those stocks as well are looking extremely robust right now. So Shree Cement, Ultratech Cement, both holding up 2.5 to 3.25% kind of gains. And Tata Steel is the one which is really leader of the metals pack right now. A near about 4% dash is what you're seeing in the green. IndusInd Bank as well holding very, very steady at a good 4%. So a bit of an ease off, but again in very select sectors like power, media, chemicals, and yes, automobiles are the ones which have cooled off quite considerably. Shefali, there is one query that we are getting on our social media timelines. It seems that the highest tax bracket has been announced at 42.74%. Could you just clarify that for us in the fine print?
We've not yet seen the fine print, Aisha, but I don't think there was any announcement about the highest tax bracket. I think what the finance minister was referring to was, combined with the surcharge rate, applicable to certain sector of taxpayers, whether it was a cooperative society or certain other taxpayers. She was referring to that, I think. I don't think there is any tweaking of the tax slab rate as such. But of course, we haven't yet seen the fine print on this.
All right, Sunil Singhania, Prashant Jain, they both join us. Prashant's been talking about capex. This budget is going to bring a biggest smile on his face, and I want to capture that big smile on Prashant's face, because from 2 years Prashant is saying, "Bhai, capex pe dhyan do. We will have to invest in capex stocks." So Prashant Jain, can we start with a smile on your face, because finally that capex push has come. That's my man, always smiling when it comes to capex.
Nikunj, could you please repeat that? Audio was not very clear.
Oh, sir, I said something about capex and which will bring smile on your face with so much of focus on the capex.
No, I think this is a very good budget, and you can see it in the fact that markets have actually not reacted, which is great news to my mind. It's clearly a growth-oriented budget, and there's a push towards capex, towards infrastructure, towards logistics, towards ease of doing business. And at the same time, I think we are moving steadily on the journey of fiscal consolidation. And I think above all, we are now seeing increasing stability in taxation. And she said that in her speech also. The government has made a commitment towards stable tax regime, towards ease of paying taxes. And I think no news on that front is once again a reiteration of that. And I think this is good because it will improve the investment climate in the country. And I think finally there is also, they've taken care to further aid the SME, the MSME, especially the hospitality sector, which has been very badly impacted by the COVID. So I think net, it's a very good budget to my mind that strikes a fine balance. Yes.
Okay. Sunil, will this budget now decisively change the bend of the market from growth to value, from high P to perhaps industrials and cyclicals? I mean, 30% uptick, 30% plus uptick on the expenditure side could really change fortunes for steel companies, cement companies, logistics.
So Nikunj, first of all, I echo what Prashant said, that, obviously we needed a big focused, domestic growth oriented budget. And I think that is what has been given. Also the fact that there has been hardly any disruption, that lends a lot of confidence to the entrepreneurs in India that we are in a stable policy regime. More importantly, apart from the government capex spending going up, I think what we have all missed out is that the lower tax rate of 15% for new manufacturing units have been extended till 31st March 2024. I think that's been a big positive. So those who even plan now would be able to get their units up and running in the next 2 years. I think that should also kick in the private sector capex. So I think overall, very clearly focused on Atmanirbharta, focused on generating employment through manufacturing, a very stable tax regime, a lot of focus on removing disputes as far as taxation is concerned. So I think overall, it's a very simple but a very, very effective forward-looking budget.
Needs to get cognizant of the fact that, look, interest rates will go higher. This budget, if at all, is going to stroke inflation, and with high oil prices and with government coming out with a fiscal target of 6.4%, it could have impact on the bond market as well. Ultimately, at what time markets would say expenditure is fine, but there is inflation which will also get created. Are we reaching there, Prashant?
I think, Nikunj, that's a fair point. And see, in India, a lot of the inflation is imported inflation, and energy is clearly imported inflation, commodities is clearly imported inflation. So I think to that extent, there is a little you can do, not just in India, but even globally. The world has underinvested in the energy space for last several years. And I think that is one of the key reasons why we are experiencing high energy prices. So, but I think at least at this point of time, the demand for trade is extremely weak, and we are seeing it for last several quarters. The trade growth in India has actually been lagging, and even December there was a small uptick, but last reading again has gone back to 8%. So I think current year should be fine because private demand is weak, but the real challenge will come in probably next fiscal, by when hopefully the demand for uh, private capex led credit should pick up. I think hopefully India would also get included in the global bond indices, and that should help over the next 2 years. And that's why I come back to the core issue that over time it is critical for us to continue to moderate the fiscal deficit. But I think we have a nice window of 1 to 2 years in which we should make good progress in that direction.
We have A. Bala as well joining in on the show. But before I take it across to Bala, let me also welcome on board Sanjeev Bajaj joining in on the show right now. Sanjeev, hi. Good to have you on the show back with us. Sanjeev, a very bold budget, a pro-growth budget and a very new age budget. What did you make of the budget announcements today?
Hoping for a significant focus on capex, on infra, because we are seeing green shoots in the private sector capex, but that takes time before that hits the ground. And it's great to see this 35% increase. We can see the bond markets are moving up because it could be short-term inflationary, but if this money actually goes into capex for infra, it has a multiplier effect, and that should actually benefit going forward. The fact that there is overall continuity in policy, no surprises on the corporate tax, income tax front, if at all some benefit on long-term capital gains. All in all, this is growth oriented and it is focused in the right directions. Some inflationary risk could be there, but if this is executed well, I think that is controllable.
Bala, enough in the budget to make markets happy or keep them happy?
Sorry. I think the way I see the budget is built is clearly the forward-looking budget, clearly paving the path, not just for only year 2022. I think beyond 2022, giving a clear investment-led growth that India can have in focusing on urban infrastructure, rural economy, and third is the ESG high focus that has come, and by focusing on digital economy as well. So in that sense, if you look at it, I think they have gone beyond 1 year of budget making. Clearly, I think setting the path for the future growth. But having said that, I think the clear focus that has come on public sector investment-led growth that I think potentially fuel the growth. Therefore, the private sector is actually onboarded along the way. Is also something is giving some bit of assurance for the growth to get established. And that's something, again, very clear direction has been given. So there was a discussion about the cost of interest rates going up. And given the fact that today money availability at any price available from the overseas market, therefore funding is not an issue. And second is equity funding, given the fact that equity market remains very vibrant and funding any growth through the equity market also now become more viable. Therefore, any increase in marginal interest rates with the government borrowing program going up, including the introduction of green bond that we have introduced, all such things may probably have a marginal impact for the government cost point of view, but I don't think it will actually have any impact on the overall interest rates going
right,
up.
Bala. Swami, allow me to just, encourage you to perhaps walk us through your thoughts on how do you see Reserve Bank of India will move now? The credit policy comes in the first week of Feb. You know that Reserve Bank of India has to adapt with what US Fed is doing. Could that be the big googly? Today we are talking about expenditure. There is no panic reaction in the bond market, but Reserve Bank of India could be forced to think differently, Swami.
Sorry, is this for me?
That's right, Swami. All
sorry,
the difficult questions, sir, are always for you.
No, okay, sorry. I was just noting the other. Can you just repeat that, please?
Swami, how do you see Reserve Bank of India now moving in the next credit policy? The backdrop is that US Fed will move. This budget, if at all, is going to stroke inflation in the short term. Can Reserve Bank of India ignore both the obvious things?
I think the Reserve Bank of India is in a very difficult situation. On the one hand, it has been very supportive of growth so far. Others have been perhaps not so. So the RBI has really, although there is a mandate for inflation fighting, frankly, this has, under Shaktikant Das, this has become a growth RBI rather than an inflation fighting RBI. At this particular point, what is it going to do? Inflation is rising in India. Wholesale price inflation of 14%. I mean, it's really we are in danger of going into a pretty high inflationary situation in the next year or two. Imported inflation is not going to help. Inflation the world over is high, as you say, because in America, inflation is rising to a new high. The Fed earlier was supposed to raise interest rates maybe 3 times in the year. Now people are talking of 4 times, 5 times. In these circumstances, what will the RBI do? I think the RBI will be a risk taker just as Nirmala Sitharaman has been a risk taker. Both of them, I think, will say, let us take the risk of inflation, but go for growth. I do not expect that the RBI is going to come down hard. Some people would say that when the budget is so accommodative, when fiscal policy is so relatively loose, 6.5% fiscal deficit, that when the fiscal is so loose, monetary should be tough. I don't think that's what's going to happen. I think the RBI is a risk taker and will say, on the one hand, I don't know how much I can do about controlling inflation to the extent that this is global inflation and imported inflation. If I try to get a very tight monetary policy, I may simply hurt the economy without actually being able to curb inflation. So my guess is that the Reserve Bank will join Sitharaman in saying, let's go for growth. We'll take the risk on inflation. And if it happens, let's not pretend that we can overcome the global factors. Let's take the risk.
Is it time to take risk? I guess that is the most important word. Sanjeev Bajaj has always insisted that look at Bajaj Finance, we know how to take a risk. We understand our asset liability franchise very well. So Mr. Bajaj, how do you see you will be able to adapt to a inflationary environment? The fact that one side the rural economy is struggling, but capital expenditure is coming back. Are you open to take slightly more risk? Because that's what government wants India Inc. to do, take slightly more risk. Mr. Bajaj.
Drawing on your analogy over there, Nikunj, taking a risk is more about managing risk. You choose the right kind of assets or you choose the right kind of investments. And as I mentioned earlier, that with the significantly higher focus on Capex across all kinds of infra, assuming that money gets put into that right purpose, what you will be taking on is a higher quality risk, which short-term could be inflationary, as was just mentioned. But I think the multiplying effect it has on the economy should help to moderate that going forward.
Prashant, just taking leave from what Nikunj asked Swami sir about, if the Reserve Bank of India were to raise rates, that's not going to go down well with the markets, right? I mean, even though the markets have somewhat tried to digest that globally and impacted us as well, but the RBI upping rates, that will definitely bring about some sort of shake-off furthermore in the markets. Prashant?
No, I didn't realize that was Hopi. So I think, we should expect the RBI to raise rates clearly, and because the current rates are a result of the prevailing situation, the situation over the last 2 years, and the bond markets, if you see, they are already pricing in significant increase at the short end of the yield curve, and the slope of the yield curve is already quite high. So actually, I would not be surprised if RBI increased rates. And I think the inflation, what we are seeing, I don't think it is because of demand conditions being excessive. In fact, the demand is actually, it's not robust in many parts of the economy. And whatever inflation we are seeing, I think is largely because of a surge in global commodity prices, both food and energy. So to my mind, I don't think the markets would take it negatively if the short end of the yield curve goes up. I think it is quite anticipated and it is reasonably priced into the bond markets as well.
Sure, fair point. For now as well, you can see that the market's gains are pretty much intact. Yes, we've ebbed off just that tad bit, but that's negligible. We're still going strong by a solid 220 points on the Nifty futures. Good market breadth. Sun Pharma, your big stunner performer today, 6% higher. Tata Steel holding up 4.5%. India Cements, Hindustan Aeronautics, Dalmia Bharat, Tata Steel, Oberoi Realty. These are your big stunners today. And of course, banks are really doing their magic. IndusInd Bank, ICICI Bank, SBI, all holding very, very steady. Sunil, do you wish though that more had been said about asset sale, disinvestment / privatization?
So, I think we have to wait for the details, but I think this is one subject where, we have always had big aspirations and big numbers. And for some reason, it does not come out true. So maybe, the finance minister has just tried to play it safe this time by not including it in her speech. But we still have to see the details. I'm very sure there would have been a good amount of credit taken for receipts from disinvestment. Otherwise, we can't reach the 6.4% fiscal deficit. So I still have to read the complete details. So, it will be too premature to comment on that.